I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough.
The abduction of the ship Albedo by Somali pirates. Aman Kumar, an Indian crew member of the ship Albedo, was asleep in his cabin when the loudspeaker suddenly announced that pirates were approaching. They were in the middle of the Indian Ocean, about 1,600 to 1,615 kilometers off the east coast of Africa. Aman quickly ran to the deck and saw 23 other crew members, including his cabin mate Rajbar, who was also Indian, gathered there. From a distance, they saw the shadow of a small boat on the waves, approaching them. The ship's captain, Javed Khan, a Pakistani, had already prepared 2 emails, one for the European Union naval forces and another for the authority they needed to inform if the ship was hijacked. He just entered the ship's coordinates into the email and pressed send. He then ordered the helmsman and others to start zigzagging maneuvers and instructed the engine room to go full throttle to escape the pirates. In essence, these were their last efforts to avoid being captured. It was now the morning of November 26, 2010, and the incident location was near the Maldives, much closer to India than to Somalia. By that time in 2010, over 200 ships had been hijacked by Somali pirates. Before setting sail, they had strung barbed wire around the ship and electrified it, ready to be plugged in so no one could board without permission. The captain told a man to plug in the wires to electrify the fence. The pirate boat drew closer and reached the ship's side. 4 men in t-shirts, armed with Kalashnikovs, easily threw ladders up and climbed aboard. The captain had not received any special training to counter piracy. If he had, perhaps he would have used a fire hose or some other means, but the captain was completely unprepared. The ship was also very heavy, and its deck was close to the water's surface. They easily threw ladders and climbed up, and the electricity didn't affect them. Perhaps they were lucky, or the electrical system was faulty. The first pirate got past the barbed wire. He paused briefly, then pushed himself forward and onto the ship. The wires scratched his body, but they paid no attention to this and forced their way in with extreme brutality. Kumar recounted, "I never thought such savage people could exist in this world." The captain ordered Shahryar Ali-Abadi, whose identity we will reveal later, to gather everyone and take them to the engine room. They all went to the engine room and from below heard gunshots and breaking glass. Then the loudspeaker demanded, "Captain, come to the deck, otherwise we will kill everyone." The captain came and told everyone to come up. Introducing the pirates and the start of negotiations. The pirate leader, a man named Ali Jabin, introduced himself. His clothes were cleaner and tidier than the others. He told them, "Gentlemen, we only want the company's money, only the money of the company that owns the ship. Give us all your money, mobile phones and valuables." They took all their belongings and piled them on the ship. Jabin, speaking in broken and unintelligible English, said, "Crew problem, Somali problem. Crew no problem, Somali no problem." Jabin gave the captain coordinates and said, "Go this way." They sailed in that direction for several hours and reached a fishing boat. There, 8 more pirates, armed with automatic weapons, RPGs and machine guns, boarded. From there, they headed towards Somalia. 6 days later, they arrived in Somalia and reached the coast. The captain initially protested, "I won't dock here. I won't anchor here because I'm unfamiliar. I have no map. You haven't given me any charts." They threatened, "Sir, otherwise we will kill you." He relented. "Okay, I'll go." He went and anchored about 5 kilometers from the shore, and they told him, "We don't have much business with you. You are our guests. Whenever the company pays our ransom, you can go home." Aman Kumar, as mentioned, was the lowest ranked and youngest person on the ship. Until last year, when he went to India to study seafaring, he had never seen the ocean. When they told him he would get $250 if he worked on the Albedo ship, he couldn't believe it. He had never seen that much money in his life. He was thrilled and boarded a plane for the first time, heading to Dubai. There he met another Indian who was also going to be on the ship, and they became friends and cabin mates. He was very happy with this experience and the considerable money he was earning. The multinational cruise situation and the premonition of disaster. Captain Javed Khan, from Karachi, oversaw a multinational crew, typical for cargo ships, 6 Pakistanis, 7 Bangladeshis, 6 Sri Lankans, and 1 Iranian named Shahryar Ali Abadi, said to be a relative of the ship's owner. Ali Abadi, a serious-looking 26-year-old with limited sea experience, was nonetheless the highest-ranking non-officer after the captain. The captain was a highly experienced man with 40 years at sea. His daughter lived in Dubai. Before he embarked on this voyage, she expressed her concern, telling him, "There's been a lot of piracy lately. Please don't go on this trip." But he replied, "I can't. I'm the captain of the ship. I can't say I won't go. If I refuse, the voyage will be cancelled. I have responsibilities, and I must go." There was also an Egyptian electrician on the ship who, the night before they departed from Dubai, dreamt that something terrible would happen to the ship. He backed out, saying, "I'm not coming." He didn't even bother to collect the pay for the few days he had worked. When they arrived in Somalia and anchored, most of the pirates left, and 12 armed guards took their place. A new team arrived with 2 cooks. A heavily built man with a rough voice also appeared, declaring, "I am the new boss." Jabin, who was previously the boss, now became the chief guard. The Albedo was about 150 meters long and carried several thousand tons of cement, rice, plates, spoons, and other goods. The ship's owner was a company named Majestic and Rich Shipping. The owner, Omid Khosrow Jurdi, had bought the ship in 2009, taken it to Malaysia, and reflagged it under the Malaysian flag. Some countries offer their flags for ships to use because they impose lower standards, and it's cheaper for the ship owner to fly the flag of these third-party countries. However, if something happens to the ship, they accept no responsibility. Furthermore, such arrangements were very helpful during sanctions, allowing Iranian ships to travel more easily. Despite its impressive name, Majestic and Rich Shipping was a one-person company. Looking at its website, it seems Khosrow Jurdi was the sole proprietor. His educational background was nanoelectronics engineering. Uninsured and defenseless against pirate ships sailing near Somalia at that time typically carried both piracy insurance and war zone insurance, as the area was, after all, volatile. However, this individual had purchased neither of these insurances for his ship. Somalia has a very weak central government. Primarily due to the central government's weakness over the past decade, these pirate gangs were able to recruit many unemployed Somali youth and expand their operations. They had designated a large maritime area as their operational zone. In 2010, which I believe was the peak year for their activities, all the pirates had smartphones. Their communications were all through social media networks and the like. They had professional negotiators, and their modus operandi was to put up initial capital to hijack a ship. Somalis working around the world would pool their capital. Once the ship was hijacked, they usually collected the ransom within a few weeks, and the initial investment yielded very good returns for the investors. How quickly the profit returned depended on the ship-owning company's ability to raise the ransom and, of course, the pirates' ability to accurately assess the ship's value, its cargo, and the ship-owning company's financial capability, so they could quickly determine the cargo and estimate, "Sir, this is worth this much," or "They are willing to pay this much for it." When they hijacked the Albedo, they named a figure a month later saying, "Sir, we want $6 million on." Khosrow Jurdi turned to the intermediary lady and said, "This figure they're giving is not logical. It needs to be a figure I can borrow and raise money for." The lady told them, "The amount you're asking for is probably double the value of the ship and its cargo." But they refused, saying, "It is what it is." Usually, if their initial estimate isn't correct, things get stuck. Crew atrocities and the fight for survival. Weeks passed without a response from Khosrow Jurdi. During this time, the crew continued to maintain and inspect the ship, constantly cleaning it. The Somali guards who had arrived didn't use the restrooms, relieving themselves wherever they pleased. The crew had to follow them and clean up. They also had to meticulously ensure the engine room was functioning. After several weeks with no progress in negotiations, the pirates began to beat the ship's personnel. One of them indiscriminately beat the crew with his rifle butt. When the ship's generator malfunctioned, the chief engineer was severely beaten until he passed out. The captain and another crew member were also taken, their feet bound tightly and hung upside down into the sea. Family campaigns and disillusionment with the ship owner. About 10 weeks later, in February, Khosrow Jurdi called, saying, "I can raise $1 million. The pirates couldn't believe the ship's value was that low. Moreover, in the same month, other pirates in northern Somalia had hijacked an oil tanker and managed to extort $13.5 million in ransom. The Albedo pirates, likely influenced by that ransom, raised their demand, saying, "Sir, we also want $13 million. This pushed the negotiations into an even deeper deadlock. 4 months passed. After 4 months, a new boss arrived. The previous boss had gradually realized that if the crew members weren't poorer than the guards and pirates, their situation wasn't much better either. Therefore, beating them and putting pressure on them wasn't very effective, as they couldn't raise money or even compel their governments to pay. The new boss, either unaware of this fact or unconcerned by it, began to beat them more severely. Then he made a list and said, "Sir, if Khosrow Jurdi responds within a week, good. If not, we'll start killing them from the top of this list." A crew member is killed and Aman Kumar's resolve. A week passed, and no response came from Khosrow Jurdi. The crew members were gathered on the deck, hands tied. Ali Abadi, standing next to the Indian crewmate Rajbar, whispered to him, "It's a bluff. They just want to scare us." Coincidentally, Rajbar was called out and taken to a place where the others couldn't see. 3 gunshots were heard. Then they called out, "Sir, call the next person and tell them to come to the deck." They went and saw that indeed he had been killed. They picked up the body and put it in the freezer. But now they understood that these people were truly willing to kill. Kumar, who had lost his cabin mate, compatriot, and only friend on the ship, became very angry, sad, and furious. Of course, he knew there was nothing he could do. He decided to start fighting in another way. His first step was to gather as much information as he could about Jabin, the crew, their operations, and their country. The 2 cooks on board were friendlier than the others. Kumar approached them and convinced them to let him help in the kitchen. With 2 meals a day, mostly noodles, potatoes, and rice, there wasn't much work in the kitchen, leaving plenty of time for conversation. They also had a habit of chewing a plant called cat, which has an amphetamine-like effect and is a narcotic plant. He started chewing it with them. They would get high and talk a lot. Gradually, he began to learn Somali words, little by little. Covert information gathering and pirate negotiations. He found himself a job on deck, assisting the guards there. He brought them tea, washed their clothes, and brought them cigarettes. Little by little, he gathered information. From what he gathered, he learned that if each of the financiers got their hands on the money, they would receive several $100,000. Jabin, for example, as the leader of the pirates, would get tens of thousands of dollars. The rest, like the other crew members, were wage earners, making a few $100s here and a few $100s there, like laborers. The longer the negotiations dragged on, the less inclined investors were to settle for a lower figure because the maintenance costs kept increasing. These were things Kumar gradually came to understand. When a ship is hijacked, the owner has few, undesirable options. He can haggle with them, agree on a figure, raise the money, hand it over, and get his ship back. Although the United Nations passed a resolution in 2008 allowing military action against pirates, no one is willing to do so in Somali waters. The few attacks and clashes that have occurred have been in international waters. The US military, which is also there, is more inclined to engage with Al-Shabaab and the like than to get involved in piracy for its own sake. Thus, military intervention is practically out of the question. They have to negotiate, agree, and pay the money. family involvement, and disillusionment with the ship owner. When they were captured, the Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, and Indian families appealed to their governments for help, but to no avail. Shiraz, the Pakistani captain's wife, was one of the few who was in contact with both Khosrow Jurdi, the ship's owner, and the Somalis. When the first person on the ship was killed, they realized there was no hope from the owner, because if he had wanted to do something, he would have prevented that person from being killed. From the summer of 2011, Shiraz and her family, including her daughters, started a campaign to raise money. They spoke with many businessmen, approached government and religious officials, placed donation boxes in mosques, created a website, set up a Facebook page. Her daughters participated in 2 television programs. They spoke with many ambassadors and lawyers in Dubai. By early 2012, the family managed to raise $1 million. Most of it was paid by a wealthy Karachi-based owner who had seen them on television. Renewed violence and ship deterioration. When the pirates realized that money had been raised in Pakistan, they gathered the Pakistani crew members, along with the other senior crew members present, the captain, Kumar, and Ali Abadi, and took them to a location on land. They filmed them in a very distressed state and sent the video to their families. Then, they called the captain's wife and said, "Sir, if you don't send the money, he will remain here in Somalia for the rest of his life." The family saw him crumpled on the ground, with a weapon pointed at him, barely recognizable, his feet swollen, and looking very gaunt and miserable. They responded, "Sir, with this money, we will only release the Pakistanis." The pirates insisted, "No, sir, we didn't intend that." Ali Abadi now became the senior officer. He began to look after the rest of the group, boosting their morale and teaching them English with the help of an Oxford dictionary. This was when the coast was gradually filling up with hijacked ships. The Albedo itself was also wearing out and falling apart. They had gradually opened up much of the cargo and plundered it. The pumps had gradually failed. The boiler was broken. The engine had been off for a long time and all its pipes were clogged. Ship sinking and rescue efforts. One day, Ali Abadi was inspecting the ship and found a leak under the deck, with water seeping in. He informed the pirates, but they dismissed it with, "No problem, no problem, no problem." They brought 2 submersible pumps to try and drain the water. However, the generator in that area was weak, and the pumps could only operate for 2 or 3 hours a day, which wasn't enough. This situation continued until June 2013. The ship began to list to one side, leaning towards the pier. Gradually, the monsoon winds started, and the waves continuously pounded against the containers. The containers, already rusty, started to loosen and break open, clanging against each other and the ship's walls. Ali Abadi gathered the crew and told them, "Gentlemen, this ship could sink at any moment." They dropped a plumb line and saw that if it sank, only the bridge would remain above water. The guards joked, "If the ship sinks, you'll all be saved. We Somalis who can't swim will all drown." On the first Friday of July, the ship's bow dipped into the water. The large waves could no longer keep the ship afloat. Water poured in, the generator failed, and all the containers slid and crashed against the walls. Ali Abadi knew what to do. He gathered several life jackets that hadn't yet been plundered and went to the engine room. He saw the chief engineer sitting there. He told him, "Get up, put on a life jacket. We have to escape." The engineer replied, "We've been prisoners here for 2.5 years. Let me die here. I'll be at peace." Escape to land and the start of new negotiations. In this terrifying situation, night gradually fell and the ship was plunged into darkness. As the ship slowly sank, Ali Abadi gathered everyone in the middle of the night and led them to the stern, which was a few meters higher than the water level. They screamed and shouted until the crew of the nearby fishing boat finally noticed them. They launched a lifeboat into the water. The crew members jumped into the water and with great difficulty reached the boat and then the fishing boat's deck, where they passed out. When Ali Abadi regained consciousness, they did a head count and realized 5 people were missing. 5 people had not been able to reach the boat and had drowned. All the Somali guards had also drowned. Those who survived were gathered by the Somalis and taken ashore to a village called Kamara, a few hours' drive away, where the entire population lived in tribal homesteads. It was in the middle of the desert, and the nearest town was a day's drive away. They were taken to a house there, and negotiations were restarted. Now there was no ship owner, no cargo, and no ship. The only thing left to negotiate was the lives of these hostages. Now, a new person enters the scene, a man named John Stid, the head of the hostage support program at an institution affiliated with the United Nations, specifically the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. He has a tidy apartment in an affluent area of Nairobi, Kenya, a neighboring country to Somalia, and works from there. His office walls are covered with photos of ships, maps of the Somali coast, lists of kidnapped people, and similar items. John Stid's role and efforts towards freedom. He did two very important things. First, he drew a lot of international media attention to the issue of piracy in Somalia. Second, he contacted the hostage takers and pirates and sent medical aid there because he was very concerned about the hostages' health. He also sent money so they could buy medicine and provide basic medical care to the hostages. However, his work was effectively stepping into a forbidden zone. While the United Nations cannot directly engage with pirates and traffickers, this individual, a UN employee, directly communicated with the hostage takers and pirates, and of course by doing so, he saved many lives. In early 2013, Stid received news that the Albedo was sinking. There were certain websites he knew the pirates checked. He posted a request for the crew's release there, along with his phone number. As he expected, many people started calling. Many of them were irrelevant individuals claiming to be in contact with the Albedo pirates and able to rescue them, but they were just bluffing. However, among them, he knew there was a small chance that someone could actually help. In Kamara, a woman named Saro was put in charge of the hostages. She took them in, renting a house in the village with 2 rooms, a kitchen, a toilet. One room was for the guards, one for the prisoners. The prisoners played chess there, exercised, practiced English, and had a radio. It was there that they learned about the war in Syria. Kumar's addiction and the escape plan Sahro was a plump, veiled woman who appeared kind. She visited them regularly, bringing food, cigarettes, and khat. Kumar had now become addicted. He sat with the guards and chewed khat every night. Kumar had also formed a friendly relationship with the woman, calling her Mama Sahro, and she would say, "You're like my son." She would occasionally take him to town to buy groceries. Sahro even rehired the previous chief guard, whom the hostages liked more. He had also realized that after 3 years, there would be no large sum of money coming. He tried to persuade Sahro to let them go, but Sahro claimed, "I've spent $700,000 keeping them alive." She wouldn't listen to his words. After some time, Ali Jabin, the violent one, was brought back again. He started beating them again. They would take them to the middle of the desert and beat them. While they were torturing them, they would call their families to put pressure on them. Now, because of the beatings and the bad conditions they were in, there were many infections. They got sick, and there was a lot of filth. Ali Abadi was hit in the face, lost a tooth, and it became infected. Their condition worsened again. Ali Abadi tried to encourage the others, saying, "Gentlemen, we must escape from here." Every night, they would sit and discuss. Some of them would explain, "No one will rescue us here, and there's no hope of survival." Those who opposed would start enumerating the obvious risks. They would say, "We don't even know where we are. We don't know where to go if we escape. In this country where it's unclear who's in charge, if we don't die of thirst and exhaustion, the chance of falling into the hands of another gang is not small." They debated every night, took votes every night, but got nowhere. Planning the final escape. In early 2014, a law firm in London agreed to take on their case pro bono, without charging any fees. They raised $200,000 from charities. They also hired a professional hostage negotiator. The night of the escape and final rescue, Leslie Edward, the lawyer in London, was against this escape. She told Ali Abadi, "The decision is yours, but I do not recommend this." Ali Abadi also said, We don't trust Jabin at all, but we also have no hope of being released with this small amount of money, which may or may not be raised over several years. So, ultimately they decided to escape. Edward began the work. She knew they liked a very formal and official appearance, so she prepared a contract format, neatly typed and everything. She emailed it to them. They printed it, signed it, scanned it, and sent it back. Below it, they wrote, "We have signed this contract and are committed to it." Their method was that they wanted all the money at once and in advance. Edward sent all the money to that account number herself. Edward also went to Nairobi to meet Stid. They arranged to meet in a valley near the village for the night of the operation. It was necessary for the guards to be incapacitated. Jabin told Kumar, "Go get some poisonous frogs, finely chop them, and put them in their food." He also found a provincial official in the mountainous area where they were staying. He paid him some money. A minister was supposed to be sent to bring them under escort from where they escaped to Nairobi. He paid the minister $11,000. The minister contacted Jabin, and they set a meeting for the night of May 10th, the night of the escape. First, Ali Abadi tried to make a hole in the fence with wire cutters that Jabin had brought, but they found it too difficult and impossible. Then they tried to tunnel through the floor of their room with spoons and forks, but progress was slow, and they saw it wouldn't work. Then there was a hinged window high up in their room that they had opened a few weeks earlier for fresh air, its welds broken. One night, they tried it and found that, contrary to previous assumptions, the thinnest person in the group could fit through it. They could use hooks and push him through. This became the plan. They decided, okay, we'll escape this way. The challenges of escape and the moment of freedom. It was May 10th night. The minister arrived at the meeting point with armed guards. An airplane was also waiting at the airport in Nairobi on standby, ready to take off once they arrived. A few nights before, Jabin had given Kumar a packet of sleeping pills. Kumar crushed these pills, and at night, mixed them into the guards' tea and food. He tasted it himself, found it wasn't too bitter. He added a bit more to be sure they would fall asleep. Night fell, and he sat with them, chewing khat. Several hours passed, and he realized they weren't falling asleep. It turned out that the khat counteracted the effect of the pills. The next night, he added even more, so much that he realized the food would be bitter, and if he gave it to them, they would know. He threw the food away, saying, "Excuse me, I spilled the food and all that." He gave up on it. In short, several nights passed like this. After 6 nights, the minister called Stid and said, "Sir, they haven't come. I'm going home." Edward saw the plan hadn't worked. They thought Jabin had cheated them. Edward then returned to London. In the first week of June, Jabin found the cut dealer who was the main supplier for the entire village.
He paid him an advance bribe to not bring any cut for a week. The guard who was in cahoots with Jabin went and got more sleeping pills and gave them to Kumar. Ali Abadi was also told, "Sir, be ready. Tonight is the night of escape." They put the pills in the food, and now that there was no cot, most of them fell asleep quickly. Ali Abadi and the others put on dark clothes and prepared to escape barefoot. Ali Abadi and Kumar also had phones. They put their phones on vibrate. They also agreed, "Sir, if any of us gets caught, the rest will surrender there."
At 3:30 a.m., Jabin called Ali Abadi and told him, "Move, I'm waiting in the car outside the village." The guard who was in cahoots with Jabin distracted the other awake guard in the yard with a video on his phone. They jumped out of the window. When they jumped out of the window, they didn't go into the yard. The window opened directly to the back of the building. They landed outside the building and started walking. They crawled alongside the houses until they were outside the village. They stood up and began walking. They called Jabin. Jabin said, "Do you see that communications antenna? Come towards that antenna." This antenna tower. They started walking towards the tower. They stopped at an aerial point to rest, huddling together to look like a shadow, a rock, a bush, something unrecognizable. When they reached the base of the tower, a Land Rover was waiting, but Jabin wasn't in it. The driver said, "Jabin sent me here." They got in, The driver drove them a few kilometers, then stopped and let them out. He also gave Kumar a flashlight. He pointed to a faint footprint in the mud and said, "If you go 500 meters forward from here, someone will pick you up." They started walking. They went a few hundred meters, and no one appeared. Worried, they called Jabin and said, "Sir, come pick us up." Jabin replied, "Baba, I'm in another city, but you continue on this path. Someone will come and pick you up." Freedom and the fate of the players. Ali Abadi and Kumar were so panicked, and the escape happened so suddenly that they hadn't even informed Edward and Stid that they were fleeing. Now, in the middle of the night, they called both of them. One was in London, the other in Nairobi. Both were asleep. They called saying, "Sir, we've escaped. We're outside, in the middle of the desert, and if it gets light, someone will come and catch us, and we'll be in trouble again. Do something, save us." Stid called a military commander in the region. He mobilized his team. A line of vehicles set off, chasing after them. They called Kumar and told him, "Climb a tree and shine a flashlight. When we see you, we'll fire shots. Come towards the shots." Finally, with wounded and bleeding feet from the thorns and rocks and the long walk, they reached the group. They were put in the car and drove all morning until they reached a safe place. The minister arrived and took custody of them. He expressed his condolences and said, "Gentlemen, your problems are over. You can go." Ransom demand from the military commander and the end of the hostage crisis. Before they could leave, the military commander who had come to pick them up, along with a military group, said, "I won't let you go." On June 7, 2014, the minister took them to the airport. Stid took custody of them. They boarded the plane and flew towards Nairobi. The captain announced, "We have left Somalia and are safe. We are in Kenyan airspace." The captains and crew all began to cry. And so, their captivity ended after approximately 3 years. The decline of Somali piracy and the fates of individuals. Now, in 2015, piracy is not as widespread as it once was. This is due to regular naval patrols, the legal actions taken against pirates in various countries, and the security measures implemented on the ships themselves. From 2012 until early this year, Somalis had not hijacked any ships, except for 2 fishing boats that belonged to Iranians. 2 of them are currently in Belgium, awaiting trial. The rest are low-level, wage-earning individuals. As for their fates, when Ali Abadi returned to Iran, Khosrow Jerdi, the ship's owner, went to the airport to greet him. However, Ali Abadi, in front of the crowd and officials who had come to meet him, treated him poorly, shaming him for the irresponsibility he had shown towards his personnel. Ali Jabin, who had taken the money, helped them escape, and double-crossed the other pirates, was shot and killed in Mogadishu in late 2014. It is unclear whether his death was related to this case or not. Javed Khan, the ship's captain, never contacted any of the other crew members afterward. But despite his reluctance and his family's wishes, he was forced to return to sea, because he had spent all his family's savings to secure his release and had no other skills to work. Kumar, the article's author, says, "The last time I saw him in India, it seemed that although he had completely quit his cart addiction, he still missed it from time to time.
I got knife. I got knife.